Joining us this evening is Marrie Ketchum. Marrie is an integrative therapist in private practice. She's worked with teens and young adults for over 15 years. She loves coaching young adults with her integrative perspective, focusing on the importance of mindset, empowering choices, and comprehensive wellness, incorporating mind and body in their journey. And also with us this evening is Sage Wheeler. Dr. Sage is a highly experienced and dedicated naturopathic physician, as well as the owner and director of Sage Med. The underlying facet of Dr. Wheeler's care is to integrate all forms of medicine using a holistic approach to help patients achieve exceptional health. So thank you so much for being with us tonight, Sage and Marrie. And welcome, Sage. I think if you're ready, we're going to start off with you.
Awesome. Hi. So yeah, thank you for the opportunity.
Still can't hear you.
Oh,
I hear him. I hear him. Do you hear me?
I hear him too.
I think everyone can hear me but you.
Uh-oh.
Sorry about that.
You got some soothing Enya.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for having me today. I am glad to come and talk about what we can do to take care of our youth and the mental health struggles that they face today. And so I would mostly today like to be available to answer any questions that any of you attending might have. And so I'm definitely going to keep it short and sweet and allow time for that. I would just like to share a little bit about my experience with my personal practice and what we do at Sage Med, where Marrie also works, to optimize mental health and mood disorders and just general health. So particularly what I see frequently in the 12 years I've been practicing, particularly in adolescents, is an increasing rate of depression and anxiety. And oftentimes when these adolescents come to our practice, we are, there's an expectation that there will be some big single intervention. Most commonly what people are used to is a medication or something that will provide rapid relief. And that's not typically the case. And I'd like to share just a little bit about our usual process and what we see in successful treatments of depression, anxiety, other mood disorders with teenagers. Is our primary focus first and foremost is on what's going on the inside in their chemistry, and what's going on the outside in their environment. And 9 times out of 10, it comes down to multiple nutritional deficiencies and some sort of environmental stressor. And typically the solution is not just a single medication or any medication at all most of the time. So starting with the inside, what we initially do when an adolescent presents with anxiety and depression, attention deficit disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder, is we want to look at their nutrition, their physiology, and what's going on with the chemistry. And that includes their diet and their lifestyle habits as well. So a lot of people here in the Northwest, and by a lot, I mean almost everybody, experiences what I call the big 3 deficiencies. My resident, who's been with me for over a year now, kind of complains what we do gets a little boring, because the majority of our workup almost always just comes down to vitamin D deficiency, an omega-3 deficiency workup, and a B vitamin deficiency. And all of those nutrients are associated with mood disorders, with fatigue, with anxiety, with sleep disorders, body feel as far as body aches, joint pain. The most common of these is vitamin D deficiency. Vitamin D comes from sunshine. And obviously here in the Northwest, we don't get a lot of sunshine. And almost every single person I've ever tested is profoundly vitamin D deficient. So that's the first thing we look for when it comes to mood disorders, particularly if you notice that the mood is affected around winter time and it worsens around winter time. Vitamin D deficiency is really easy to correct for. It's a simple supplementation regimen, usually liquid drops, capsules, and that one's an absolute slam dunk. There's almost an immediate improvement in mood and energy. And oftentimes, just what's one thing alone um, can lead to enough improvement that counseling with Marrie and other simple changes results in satisfactory improvement. The next one is the omega-3 deficiency. Omegas come from fatty fish, mostly, so salmon, sardines, cod, and herring. And this one, again, is very commonly deficient. I would say it's about 90% of the people I test. And omega-3s act as kind of like the insulating substance around the neurons in the brain. They soothe inflammation. It's an important part of muscle and bone and joint health. And so again, strongly correlated with depression, anxiety, cardiovascular issues, body aches, and fatigue. So this one's also a fairly easy one to address and treat. Typically, it's a combination of increasing dietary sources of fish, but also plant-based sources, chia seeds, walnut, hemp, flax, soy, and then some capsules, some omega concentrates can be really helpful to get the levels up more quickly. And then the third nutrient is the B vitamins, primarily B12 and folate. This is where testing gets a little more complicated. Sometimes people have already been to see a conventional doctor, and you've been doing some reading on the internet. You might read about it, and the doctor, well-intentioned, will order some serum B12 and some serum folate. Those actually aren't the appropriate tests to do. Those will show you how much they've consumed in their diet or through supplementation. But what we really want to see is what are the levels in the brain. So we test for homocysteine and methylmalonic acid. I would say probably 60 to 70% of the adolescents I test come up with deficient in this as well. The folates are found in dark leafy greens and berries. Again, supplementation can play a part. B12 is usually found in meat, particularly eggs, but also in some fortified foods. If the adolescent is vegan or vegetarian, it's almost guaranteed they're going to be deficient in B12. And so those are the three big ones. And as far as what's going on the inside, the majority of people, again, will be deficient. And correcting those deficiencies largely will take care of the issues they're dealing with. If not, we're going to look at some dietary aspects. Teenagers, young kids especially, they just very finicky eaters. They tend to eat what I call the beige foods. You got your pasta, your breads, your pastries, and chicken nuggets. Not a lot else. Vegetables are, definitely not a top of the list. So some simple improvements. It doesn't have to be a big fancy complicated diet, just less of those beige foods, more of the colorful foods. Try to get kids to eat the rainbow every day. So a blue food, a green food, a red food, a yellow food. Get more of those antioxidants and those micronutrients in. And then exercise tends to also be a big factor. Not all the kids, but a lot of the kids that we talk to are having mood issues, are not exercising regularly. And a lot of them are addicted to their screens, whether it's the cell phone or video games. And so that's part of the environmental factors that we're first going to look at. There can be some other environmental factors, but those are the big ones. Sometimes if we're still not seeing improvement, we get a little bit more exotic, looking at potential mold toxicity, which is fairly common here in the Northwest. And then, of course, looking at family dynamics, and that's a big one. Kids are very perceptive, and there's a variety of issues that can impact kids, whether it's picking up on families' financial issues, relationship issues between the mom and dad. Um, they're very aware and they're very sensitive to that energy. Also, a big one is just expectations. Parents' expectations often differ a lot from their kids' expectations. One thing that I always ask when someone comes in, they're there with their parents, there's adolescent. I like to speak to that adolescent on their own typically and ask, are they distressed? A lot of times there's complaints of focus problems, grade issues. My kid definitely has ADD and he needs medication. I get the kid alone and they're a B plus student and they're not distressed at all by their inability to focus. They just don't like math. So that's probably more Marie's ballpark, is talking about those family dynamics and expectations, and really coming in with an appropriate concept of what the teenager is dealing with, and whether they're personally distressed or parents are distressed by what they perceive. And that's a very, very important thing to talk to. And you can simply just ask the child, does it bother you? Are you bothered by your inability to focus? Are you bothered by how often you feel melancholy? And that can really help differentiate between a real disorder and just a preference or a situational issue. And I think that that's kind of my top list of what I wish people could know before coming in getting medical care for their children, because I think those are things that are often not addressed in what I call mainstream medicine, where you go to a classic primary care doctor or you go to a psychiatrist even. There's pretty much a very rapid acceptance of what people think is going on, and a pretty quick path to medication. I'm not saying there's never a time or a place for that medication. We prescribe medication at Sage Med. But what I want to highlight in today's discussion is what we call the therapeutic order. The therapeutic order is really what makes a naturopathic physician different than a medical doctor. We really have a strong preference for natural things, so obviously naturopathic doctor. So we're going to start with diet, lifestyle, expectations, sleep, and other habits. We're going to go to nutrition. First, looking at nutrition we can get from food, then perhaps supplementation. Usually that involves some sort of laboratory testing. Then we're going to get into what we call nutraceuticals. Nutraceuticals are something that are stronger than just your regular vitamins and minerals. They tend to be a combination of herbal medicine and higher potency vitamins. And then, failing all of that, plus counseling, exercise, then we might consider medication. And my wish for all adolescents dealing with mood disorders and other mental health issues is that they at least get the opportunity to go through the therapeutic order. A lot of people now in their 20s, where I'm working with them now, and they're like, yeah, I've been on Ritalin since I was 10. And they never had an opportunity to make an informed decision about the long-term impacts of that. When inevitably they desensitize to that medication, there's permanent changes to the dopamine transporters in the brain that, as far as we know, never go back to normal. So that's not to say it's never appropriate. Sometimes you need a lifetime of that medication, but everyone deserves a chance to go through that therapeutic order and start from the bottom and work their way up. So it's a little bit of what I call slow medicine. It's a little bit like slow cooking. It's a lot more effort, it takes a lot more time, but compared to fast food, it's generally worth it and you get better outcomes. So that's just my quick little 10 minutes about what I wanted to talk about today. And I would like every parent to have that in mind when seeking help for their kids, that there is something between the things you do at home and research yourself, and then going to the highest level of professional, say a psychiatrist, and immediately just going on medication. There's so much room in the middle. And of course, if you can integrate that with an excellent therapist like Marrie here, and do all those things at the same time, some talking, some cognitive approaches, while their body is being nourished and supported, the outcomes you can get are just simply exceptional. So that's really all I have to say in a nutshell. I'd like to take an opportunity to just look in the chat if anybody has any questions. I can see what you were typing in the chat, and I would be glad to answer any specific questions that anybody has. While we're waiting for those to come up, the final thing I'd like to touch on is awareness of when to take your child to see a doctor and what are the signs and symptoms to look for. And hopefully in other discussions regarding this, you approach that. But typically, you have your classic kind of depression where there's obviously a melancholy, sadness, closed off, hiding out in the room. Oftentimes it can look a lot different than that. It can just be a change in what you perceive, having known them for the whole lives. It's just a sudden change in personality, a sudden loss of interest in the hobbies that they've always seemed to enjoy. Someone who's an avid soccer player suddenly doesn't want to play soccer anymore. Even though on the outside they don't appear to be mopey or melancholy, they're just losing interest. And that's one of the classic features of depression. It's what we call anhedonia. And it doesn't always look sad. Sometimes they can even, try to put on a happy face for everybody. But they're just not doing the things they normally love to do. And you can visibly see they're not getting that enjoyment in there. And then with anxiety, again, there's the classic presentation. The classic presentation, fidgety, anxious, nervous, and rubbing their hands together. But again, you got to watch for those just simple changes in personality, avoidance of things and friends they previously had good relationships with, and oftentimes what I call like the deer in the headlight kind of presentation. My point is, all of these things present very differently for different kids. And it's so important to just, when you observe a change, just check in with the kid and try to, touch base with them. Just how are you feeling? Open-ended questions. And avoid those kind of direct, like yes or no questions. Are you depressed? Are you feeling anxious? You're asking the child to self-diagnose at that point. And just, hey, I noticed you don't want to play soccer anymore. Why is that? And have a conversation. And, oh, when I play soccer, I don't know, I can't seem to get over this weird feeling I have. Like everyone's expecting me to do good. And just to the point where it's not really enjoyable for me anymore. Well, that's obviously a sign of depression or anxiety. They don't necessarily think in their minds that is depression or anxiety. They just suddenly just feel like there's some pressure on them to perform, whether that comes from themselves or other people, or, that can be figured out later. And then fatigue is the big one. Both anxiety and depression can cause fatigue. If you suddenly see your child just laying around, kind of feeling lazy, definitely looking apathetic, that can be fatigue, from nutrient deficiencies. It can be anxiety, it can be depression, it can be all three. So always bring your child to the physician if they just suddenly have a prolonged period of fatigue. There's almost always something wrong. Children generally should be full of energy. And when you see them not bouncing off the walls, it's the time to get concerned. So we have a question here. It's kind of what I was just talking about. How do you ask a child themselves about how they are feeling and whether they like that? And are there any good questions we can ask them as parents to help them get the help? And again, it goes to just asking open-ended questions and not just, are you X, Y, and Z? Let's talk about your day. One thing I like to do with my kids is ask kind of a little bit more unique questions and gauge their response to that. And so instead of like, how was school? I'll say, hey, tell me one thing you learned today. if you ask how was school, you just inevitably get the fine, boring. What's one thing you learned today? Now, a healthy kid will respond, I don't know. Think about it. And well, we learned about Pythagorean's theorem in math today. And that's one thing they learned. All right, well, tell me something funny that happened today. Is there something funny? Yeah, so-and-so said this thing and it was funny. Those are all normal responses. Whereas in that kind of open-ended question, they really struggle. Tell me one thing you learned today. For the life of them, they can't think of a single thing they learned. Tell me something funny today. Nothing's funny to a depressed adolescent. And you can tell they're sincerely just at a loss for words. So those are just, a few samples of open-ended questions that you can ask. And of course, you know your child and their personality. I've got one child where I would expect a long story for each of those answers and a couple, 2-word answers from my other child. And so a sudden variance from what you know to be your child's personality is always a concerning sign. The other question is, how do you get your child to go to a doctor or therapist? If you know they need to go, but they won't go, any tips on what to do? Well, obviously, this depends a lot on the age of the child. Age 14 and above, it gets a lot more complicated. That's the age where they have what's called medical autonomy. So they can, anything they say to a therapist is completely private, and also with a doctor. So they can get them in alone in a room with a doctor or a therapist, and they can literally just say nothing. There's not a lot you can do about it. But getting them to go is simply making them appointment and bringing them. They could, I guess, hold on to the door and kick and scream and refuse, but sometimes just, hey, I notice you just don't seem like yourself, and I'd like to just take you to get a checkup, and avoid anything like, again, direct labels and direct questions. I think you're anxious. I think you're depressed. Let's go talk to a psychiatrist, right? It's like, no, don't take me to the whatever they have in their mind, a stereotype. The crazy doctor. I'm not crazy. You're the one that's crazy. Just say, hey, you notice you're not feeling like yourself. Let's go get you a checkup and just see if there's anything going wrong. Again, avoiding any labels, right? Say, oh, I listened to this lecture and Dr. Wheeler says 99% of the kids have vitamin D deficiency. Let's go get yours checked. I notice you don't seem to be feeling well, right? So avoid any preconceptions and avoid any labels, and say, hey, I think you have OCD. I Googled it. You have all the symptoms. Let's go see a psych and get you some meds. There's already a diagnosis, an expectation, and a treatment in mind. And if they don't agree with that, they're really not going to go. So again, keep it very open-ended, keep it non-confrontational, make it seem as least interventional as possible. And I haven't had any problems. I get some kids who very closed off, like, and you got to remember, if you get them there, you're bringing them to a professional. And we know how to connect with that child and how hard to push it. And I can usually get them to loosen up with a little bit of humor, downplaying the situation. Getting them, sometimes I can tell they need to be just speaking one-on-one with me. The first thing I ask them is, hey, does anything seem off to you? Are you bothered by any of this stuff? And they'll think about it long and hard. And yeah, maybe I used to be able to focus better. Now I don't seem to be able to. How much does that bother you? A little bit. It bothers my mom a lot. How does that make you feel? We can get a dialogue going pretty easy. Just getting them there with no expectations other than just checking in is a good way to approach it. Any other questions? All right. Well, thanks so much for your time. I hope that was helpful. And if you have any further questions, feel free to put them in the chat and we can address those after Marrie gives us her little spiel. Oh, last question. Do they have to be in person? No, for really difficult cases where the kid's like, no way, I'm not going to a doctor. I don't even want to talk to you, then It's tough. So I'm always, it varies doctor to doctor, depends on how flexible they're willing to be. I'm always willing just to talk with the parent, because doctors, honestly, to be frank, they're worried about getting paid. If the patient's not there, how can I bill the insurance, without committing fraud? Well, my opinion is, if a kid is really so bad that they refuse to go to the doctor and the parent is very concerned, I'm glad to talk to the parent, and simply diagnosis is acute stress situation. Like, there's very broad diagnoses we can use, but we'll talk the whole time about your kid. And then the question is if they are out of state, depends. The doctor has to be licensed in the state that the patient is in. But right now, because of coronavirus related issues and the CARES Act, that particular law has been waived. So take advantage of it. If there's a really good doctor in New York and you live in Washington, you could do a video consult and it would be legit, even if that doctor's not licensed. But that probably is going to go away soon. So if you're out of state, you just got to call ahead and see if the doctor's licensed in that state.
All right, thank you so much, Sage. That just gives us so much to think about. That really is, that's some new information. That's not stuff that's kind of getting out to a lot of parents. So thank you so much for sharing that.
My pleasure.
Yeah, and so let's hand it over to Marrie. What do you have for us?
Okay. Thank you also for having us. We love being here. I love getting a chance to talk about just a different approach. I think whenever I'm connecting with teens or parents over the years that I've been in practice, I've really noticed how much people appreciate an approach that's really integrative. And what I like about that is I see a lot of strengths in that. So we have the opportunity with integrative mental health and wellness to really look at all of the ways, all of the things that we can do to improve somebody's health. And so kind of like Sage was talking, sometimes when we think about mental health, people might jump directly to, oh, I need medication or a diagnosis. And really, our mental health is comprised of many, many things. And there's many things we can do to strengthen our mental health and improve how we're feeling. So that's kind of what I'm going to touch base on today a little bit. And that's really why I like being a part of Sage Med. The first conversation Sage and I ever had, actually, he said something to the effect of like, oh, I would prescribe exercise before medication any day. And I was like, yes, that's amazing. So, if we can really look at our lifestyle and all the things that we can do, medication sometimes is a part of that, but there's oftentimes a lot of other components as well. Before I go on, can you guys hear me and see me? Because all of a sudden I can't see you guys. Okay, there you are. Yes. You guys hear me and see me okay? Okay, awesome. So one thing that we have learned through, oh goodness, I just have some slides here to give me a little back. There we go. So is that everybody has mental health. And I don't have good technology skills. Hold on. Well, I'm going the wrong direction. Okay, this is why I'm so good with people, but not so good with technology. Okay, it's coming back. Here we go. Everybody has mental health. So I love this slide. And I feel like this is one of the best and most beautiful lessons of 2020 is that so many more people are talking about mental health, what that means, and also really seeing mental health as a strength versus a weakness. So to me, when I think about teaching teens and their parents how to talk about mental health, how to recognize the feelings that we have, how to take care of our feelings and our emotions, how to take care of our thoughts, our perspectives, how we're kind of working with the situation that we have, how we take care of ourselves through our actions. To me, that's really strength. That's building strength and resilience. And I think about mental health as a wellness versus something that is, wrong with you or something that is critical. And I feel like before that was a big shift before 2020 to now, everybody is a lot more accepting and open. And I hear much more discussions and it's much more mainstream to be talking about mental health. How are we taking care of our anxiety? Anxiety is coming up for people. And kind of the conversation has really opened up about that. And I really appreciate that. I think that's pretty awesome. So mental health, yep.
Real quick, we can't see your slides.
Okay, I was wondering about that. Bonnie, is that, because I see them, but Bonnie, how do I, or can you pull them up?
I don't think I can pull them up. I wasn't able to download them from.
Oh,
what
okay,
you
because I
said.
have it on sharing, but I don't know why. And that's,
Hmm.
so you guys can't see.
I'm not seeing your slides.
Okay,
And you already hit share screen, Marie?
I did. Yeah, on my screen, it's showing that it is sharing.
Got me there. I use Zoom every day. And usually if you're sharing, you're sharing.
I know, right? And actually, Bonnie, I thought when you and I practiced, it was
Good,
working.
yeah, it was working. I don't know. I can't explain it. I'm not sharing screen right
Okay.
now. So.
Well, so maybe we can just share this later with people, but
Yeah,
I'll just
we
kind
can
of,
share
I'll
the slide
kind of
deck
keep
with the
chatting.
follow-up.
Okay. So when I think about mental health and wellness, there's kind of three big components that I talk about with people. So there is the bucket of our thoughts. There's our feelings, our emotions, and then there's our actions. And each of those gives us a lot that we can do to impact the other. And that is a lot, if you've heard about the CBT model, the cognitive behavioral therapy model, that's a lot around that. So with our thoughts, it's learning to kind of check in on the quality of our thoughts, you know, that not all of our thoughts are true. Sometimes our brain tells us things that are not really helpful, how we work with our thoughts, how we respond to our thoughts, how we can kind of improve the quality of our thoughts. And of course, our thoughts impact our feelings. Anxiety is a really great example of that. If we're having some thoughts that something terrible is going to happen, our fight or flight center of the brain is going to start to get us to feel kind of anxious, and our heart might start racing. So we might really start to have that feeling of anxiety, and then that could impact what we're going to do. So sometimes we may want to distract ourselves or kind of check out and go to social media, but really what could be helpful is to maybe do a breathing exercise or grounding exercise, or take a walk or connect with a friend. So that other bucket is kind of learning the actions that for each individual teen are not really prescribed. It's really getting to know them. And I love doing that and finding out, you know, what is it for them that feels supportive? What feels like connection? What feels like fun? What's a movement that they would enjoy? Of course, we want to be exercising. It's really, really important for so many things, but finding an exercise that we enjoy is going to help us do that much more consistently. I'm so bummed that these slides aren't working, and I don't know how to problem solve that in real time. So I'll just kind of keep going, but let me know. And also if there's questions that come up, I would be, of course, happy to check in with all those in just a little bit. And then as parents, and I want to say I'm a therapist, but I'm also a parent. I have 4 kids, 3 of which are teenagers. I think one of the really important things that we do as parents is having compassion. And what I mean by that is a lot of times with our kids, we want to jump in, and parents, you know, call me in a panic and say, oh my gosh, this is happening and this is what I've done. And we want to jump in, we want to protect, we want to solve the problems, we want to get them the resources. That part is great. But a lot of times it's about compassion. And compassion, if we break that word apart, means co, which is with, and suffering. And so we want to learn how to walk alongside our teens, be with them, of course, offer them the resources, but also, you know, validate their experience, not jump in and fix it. Walk alongside with them, help them find their own resources, help them understand kind of what they're learning, what they're going through. And I think that's often feedback I get from teens is, you know, a very common, my parents just don't understand. But a lot of times that's, you know, taking the time to really get to know what's happening for them. As Sage talked about, you know, asking those questions. Great open-ended questions are, you know, if you're seeing your teen looking really down or really anxious, asking, you know, if we could change anything, what would you like to see differently in your life? What would be something that would feel differently? Oh, is that the screen sharing now? Did it just start? Now, can you guys see my slides? No? You can? Yes. Okay, you can see my slides? Sage can
Yeah,
see
I
my
can
slides.
see them.
Okay. Bonnie, can you see the slides?
Yes, we're on the compassion,
Oh.
the wellness, thoughts, feelings, actions.
Okay, perfect. Yay. Okay, great. So yeah, so having that ability to kind of be with them through a hard time and put aside maybe some of the things that are coming up for us ourselves, or trying to fix it, and really being with them. That's asking them questions. That's helping, help me understand is a great one. Like, if they're telling you something about that's happening with a group of friends or something that's really stressful, what not to say might be like, oh, it'll be fine tomorrow, or, we all go through it, get over it, it'll be fine. Like, very unvalidating, really not helpful. So really just asking more questions. Help me understand is a really good one. What's that like for you? What would help it feel differently? And then to answer that question, there was one about how to help your teen get to a doctor, a therapist. I think acknowledging like, hey, I see that things are different for you right now, and I really want to support you. And this is something that maybe, if you don't know, like, I don't know enough about this, let's go talk to somebody that can really give us some guidance here. Simple as that. Let's find out what else we can do. I think there's going to be some other resources. And that's again why I really like that integrative approach. Sometimes talking about things is really scary. There's some teens that come in and we can't get them to stop. And sometimes talking directly about a problem is really hard. And so we might start with something different. We might start with nutrition. We might learn about kind of what they're eating, what's on their plate. And I might challenge them. I think Sage talked about this too. How do you add into what you're eating and eat the rainbow? And I'm not talking about like eat the rainbow of Skittles, but, bringing in different colors. And sometimes that's fun. And that's something they can think about. I think teens are really logical in a lot of ways, and they want to know the why. So always explain, if I'm going to recommend for somebody to eat the rainbow or eat more spinach, like, what is that about? What is that going to do for their brain? How is that going to help their neurons connect? And they actually really like to know the science behind it. And I think that helps them to make better choices and to understand kind of the difference there. And this little picture here of the kids jumping on the beach, that was kind of just to think about, helping your teen find things that they enjoy. And sometimes that's going to look different than what a parent's, as Sage said as well, expectation. So if you've had a kid that's been like a soccer player their whole life and all of a sudden they're not interested in soccer, and how do we find a movement that they enjoy? That might be hiking, that might be swimming, that might be, whatever, paddleboarding, but find something that they enjoy and feel connected with and is their own passion. At some point, when kids are little, we kind of have them engage in activities, and then it's going to become their own thing, or it's going to still be a parent-driven thing. It really needs to become their own thing that they're passionate about, and is really, that can really then be a good coping strategy and a good resource for them. Now, of course, it's going to not come down. Ugh, man. Speaking of teens, I need a technology class. Okay, this is a funny little thing I talk about with everybody. If you've worked with me, I talk about GAC. This is just a fun thing to think about. So GAC is kind of that slime, and we think about like, I want you to cover yourself in GAC. So sometimes if we can shift our perspective a little bit and think about gratitude, if we can take a moment to think about what is something that we're grateful for, that is a coping strategy that I think I have everybody start with the first day that I meet with them. At the end of your night or at the dinner table or with a friend, can you share one thing that you're grateful for that day? It's so important to acknowledge, even when we're having a hard time. Switching into gratitude is a great strategy. It does ignite a different part of our brain, and that's the part of our brain that we really want to strengthen when we're working with anxiety and depression. So we want to bring in the gratitude, we want to bring in the acceptance, and acceptance is a lot around kind of how we're feeling. So there's some expectations out there that we should feel a certain way. We should be happy, we should not be sad or whatnot. We should have particular grades, we should be engaging in certain things, we shouldn't feel certain ways. And so whenever we're in shoulds, I really want to shift out of that and focus on acceptance. It's okay, as human beings, we get to experience a whole range of emotions, and not all of them are comfortable. And so when we're noticing our kids feeling discomfort, that's okay. That doesn't mean that we need to jump in and fix that. It's really being with them and accepting all of our feelings, and then learning how we take care of those feelings and how we cope with those feelings. And that brings us to that compassion piece as well. And I'm seeing a lot of great questions pop up, which is awesome. So I definitely want to have time to answer those. Oh my goodness, and this is amazingly not working for me. Okay, how do I Oh, there we go. Okay. This is another fun one that I love to give education on, and that's the negativity bias. And so I think it's so great to talk about this with teens and how our brains work. So our brains are really wired for protection. This was a big aha moment for me when I learned this. So when we have a negative thought or we have a worry, our neurons literally in that first second, they wire and they fire. And that part of our brain starts to kick in and it's firing and it's building. And we don't really want to be building that part of our brain. And so we have that negativity bias, and we know this cool research that we actually have to thoughtfully and mindfully think of a joyful event or gratitude or something that's positive for 20 seconds for that same neural activity to happen. And so just helping kids understand that, you know, sometimes when we're always in negative thoughts, when we're always in difficult thoughts, when we're in anxiety, we're going to be feeling that's going to be pretty harsh. We're going to be not having a great response to that. And it's important to break that up and also bring in how we can think about things in a different way as well. Okay, I'm going to stop really quick and answer some questions, I think, because there's a bunch popping up here. Is this the chats? Bonnie, can you help me with, because I see a bunch of chats, but I don't see the questions. Is this all chats or questions?
So I can't because, well, so if I'm
Okay,
the slides.
I got it. Okay. Okay, I thought I had 10 questions come up, but I think that was just the chats. Okay. So I'll keep going. These are just some slides, some pictures of different things that you can kind of help your teen think about if they would like to engage in. Of course, we talk a lot about meditation, breathing exercises, grounding techniques. Those are wonderful. They really do help change our brain. It's pretty cool science. There's some great apps these days that can help with that. Headspace is one of my favorites. It's quick, it's easy. It can be 1 to 3 minutes, but it's a great practice. Getting engaged in music, whether they're listening to music or music that they enjoy playing themselves, that's really helpful. Getting out in nature, even when it's cold outside, just connecting to nature itself can be super, super helpful for our mental health. Getting out on walks, and then journal writing. And a lot of people are like, oh, I don't want to journal write, or feel like it would be a lot of effort. And it doesn't have to be a lot. It can be a gratitude practice. It can be something that you're writing down every day in a journal, 1 to 3 things that you're grateful for, that counts. It can be a release writing practice where you sit down every night and just kind of do a brain dump. That can actually be really helpful for sleep. Just get all those thoughts out. And so that you are clearing up a little bit of brain space for yourself there. So those are just kind of some quick ideas on strategies that can help your mental health as well. And then as Sage said, we talk about eating the rainbow. That was the slide I was looking for earlier. A lot of times, you know, sometimes teens are worried about, and this would be like a whole nother topic, but, you know, worried about weight or body image, that plays a lot into self-esteem. And so just explaining kind of the nutritional part and how what we eat really impacts not just our physical body, but how what we eat really impacts our brain, and can really be a contributor to depression and anxiety. And just as well, like that can be something that we can do that's really a strength and can really help us feel better. And as also Sage talked about, that can be a quick turnaround. When we're making some changes with the nutrition, kids start to feel better pretty quickly, and we can really notice some positive changes there. And in addition to nutrition too, checking in with what they're drinking. So we want to check in on caffeine, if they're drinking caffeine at night, how much they're drinking, all the other energy drinks that are out there that can be, I don't know, wow, this thing's just going. I'm not even touching the computer. The slides are moving. If they're staying hydrated, hydration can be a big part of feeling anxious as well. So all of those kind of wellness pieces that we want to look into. Okay, I think my computer totally has a mind of its own. This has never happened to me before. Okay, I'm going to stop because this is, I don't even know why it's just moving around like crazy. Wow. Okay. Are there any chat questions that have come up while I'm talking away here?
Marrie, while we're waiting for chat questions,
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you if you could talk a little bit about you had mentioned body image and relationship with food. And I happen to know that you will be speaking with youth about that. Our Teens and Tweens on our Instagram page on April 20th, I believe.
Yes, I think that's what Allison and I decided on. Yeah. Yeah, so that's on the Balance in Mind Instagram page. And I was doing like a once a month or so about mindful moment where we would have a different theme and I would kind of check in, and mostly it's just really answering questions that teens have. And I love doing that. I haven't been able to do that for a little bit, but this next one coming up in April, we're going to really talk about relationship with food. Eating disorders have been have really gone up over the course of Corona. We've seen a lot of that in a lot of different ways. And also a lot of times in the spring towards the summer, that's something that's really coming up as well around body image. So I will be talking on the Balance in Mind Instagram page on that on April 20th.
So Marrie, we had a couple of questions that were submitted in advance that we can ask too while we're waiting for people to join in. One is about sleep. I know that that's a concern of a lot of parents. It says my high school student stays up late working on homework quite a bit. Sometimes his friends even brag about how little sleep they're getting. How much of a concern should this be? And is this something that can be related to mental health struggles later on?
Sage and I are both nodding our heads. Yes, absolutely. We do see that a lot. A lot of the kids that are here, that are around here in our school districts are very high expectations, doing a lot of AP classes, and they are staying up late. They are not getting sleep, and they do brag about it. Yes, it is really important to talk about, why sleep is important, why it is important to rest our brain, how much not getting sleep plays into anxiety. The less sleep that you get, the more anxiety you're going to have. And then a lot of times what kids throw into that mix is caffeine. And so we are drinking tons and tons of caffeine, sleeping less, and anxiety is going to be really high. And so we do want to look at all of those pieces and just start with some really small changes. It might be like, 15 to 20 minutes at a time of trying to get to bed a little bit earlier, trying to create some kind of a wind down routine. So we're off technology a little bit, at least before bed. We're maybe doing a brain dump or listening to music or a meditation, something that's going to help them get the quality sleep that their brain really needs to be doing everything that it's going to be doing the next day. Sage, do you want to touch on sleep and technology? Yeah.
And really this comes down to, I think parents need to put more pressure on the school district about the sometimes ridiculous hours of school. I know my kids have school starts at 7, some weird time, like 7:34 or something like that. And, particularly for my teenage daughter, she feels the need to be presentable and because there's that, pressure on how particularly females appear. Where my son will roll out of bed 10 minutes before, put on his boots and hat and roll in his athleisure wear that he wore to bed and just go to school. Whereas my daughter wakes up at 5 and she's up till 11:30 or 12 doing homework. So, that's a huge issue. And I recall an associate at Allegro Pediatrics told me they were paid quite a bit of money to do a large study on the impact of these school hours and what it was having on kids. And they found it was extremely detrimental. And the school district said, thanks for the info. We're going to keep doing what we're doing. And because of buses, right? And so I think this is tremendously underestimated, the massive negative impact this is having on kids. And so you throw into that, again, we're going to talk about expectations. So if you have a child who has a strong drive, that's wonderful. That should be supported. But honestly, if it takes them 6 hours to do an AP assignment that should take 2, then it's okay to say, you know what, maybe this isn't for you. And it's not worth the cost of your mental and physical health to keep doing more AP classes. Unfortunately, there are some really gifted kids out there who can do that assignment in 2 hours. And those classes are for them. We need to really avoid the pressure that we put on kids to say, hey, you need to do this too. It's not fair to them. It takes them 4 to 6 hours and that costs them sleep, sanity, and all sorts of issues. So again, it comes to putting pressure on leadership to prioritize health, both physical and mental. It's not only bad for your mental health to lose sleep, but you can also have a depressed immune system, for lack of appropriate sleep, especially in time of these pandemics. It's a very dangerous thing to do. And so I would encourage everyone to put a little pressure on the school district about some misguided policies regarding start times of school based on busing schedules. Like, that's the priority. And also homework. It's strictly speaking I'm not a doctor of education, but strictly speaking from a scientific perspective, there's no evidence that homework improves education before age 16. And we have 12 and 10 and 12-year-olds being given homework that, scientifically speaking, is absolutely useless. And until we put pressure on educators to stop doing things that are not evidence-based, they're going to continue to do so. And just like we've made progress against standardized testing, which was also shown to not be evidence-based and effective, means of education, just prepping kids for standardized tests. Same goes for these absurd homework assignments and projects that they're given. What we're missing is really a focus on critical and adaptive thinking. And if we can get back to that, it's a lot less time consuming, and kids can get back to getting sleep, which allows them to think critically and improve their education. So we definitely, in my medical opinion, I see that side of education that I think a lot of educators are not seeing. They're tired, worn out, absolutely threadbare kids. And I think they need to come sit in my chair a little bit and get a better viewpoint of some of those policies.
Thank you so
Quite
much.
the soapbox, as you can tell.
Yeah, it's a sensitive issue. It's real, and you're seeing the consequences of that, as I'm sure you probably are as well, Marrie.
Yeah, I mean, some of the things we hear from kids about their schedules, and I have a couple of kids of my own at home that are doing this, but they're getting up, they're out the door by whatever, 6:30, and then they go to clubs, and then they go to sports practice, and then they are studying for AP tests, and then they're like home at 9 or 10, and then they have dinner, and then they're studying more. I mean, that is an intense load, and they're 16. Like, there's that's still young. There's still a lot of life ahead of you that is going to have that high demand, and that is not very balanced. And there's no time in there for self-care.
All right. Well, we could go on and on, but we're just about at the 8 o'clock mark, so we're gonna have to wind it up for tonight. I want to thank both of you so much for being here with us, Marrie and Sage, for taking the time to talk to our parents and giving us so many new things to think about. This is really this is new and different, and I'm so glad that we're able to provide some space for you guys to get this message out to parents who may not have heard it before through the regular channels. So thanks again for being here. I want to let you know that the next parent chat is going to be another super interesting one, I think, on youth susceptibility to extremism and what parents can do about that. Enrique Nusi is going to be here from the Center of Terrorism, Extremism, and Counterterrorism from Middlebury Institute. So that is in 2 weeks at 7. We're going to follow up on this. The recording will be available to you with our follow-up email, which will be out in just a couple of days. And if you have any other, if Maria and Sage, if you have any resources that you want to share with our audience tonight, go ahead and you can send that to us, and we'll add that in the follow-up email. So, as well as your contact information, we'll pass that along as well in case people want to get in touch with you. So. Thank you so much again for being here with us. Thanks all the parents out there who stayed with us tonight, and have a wonderful rest of your evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
As you're going, if you think of it, if you want to say something that you got from this, something that you learned, that would be fantastic as you're exiting.